Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's Young Alumni Virtual Chat, Preparing for Graduate School, brought to you by the UMass Amherst Alumni Association. My name is Nicole Young, and I serve as the Assistant Director for Young Alumni and Constituent Programs for the Alumni Association, and I will be hosting this evening's session. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items. All participants, minus the moderator and panelists, will be muted throughout the presentation in order to reduce background noise. This virtual chat will be recorded, and the recording will be posted to the Alumni Association's YouTube channel in the coming weeks. By joining this session, you are giving your consent to such recordings. We have a limited amount of time, so we will save Q&A for the end of the session. As the presentation is taking place, if you have a question, please use the chat function to send your questions to me. I will compile your questions, and then I will pose them to the moderator and the panelists at the end of the facilitated conversation. And now, without further ado, I'm very excited to begin tonight's panel by introducing the moderator. Heather Kleitz received her doctorate in educational measurement in 2010 from UMass School of Education's Research and Evaluation Methods program. Heather is in her 19th year at the Evaluation Systems Group of Pearson, where she's currently a Director of Educator Solutions for Licensing and Learning, overseeing the development and operations of assessments for teacher licensure. Thank you, Heather, for contributing your time to this evening's panel and for moderating.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks for the introduction. And I'd like to now introduce the panelists that are joining us tonight, and we look forward to answering some questions and really giving you some information and background from our perspectives. First, I'd like to introduce Tom Gilbert, class of 2011, an engineering graduate, and he's currently fully enrolled full-time, right, in an MBA program. Hi, Tom.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. And next, Emily Hajar, class of 2014, in political science. And I believe you also have a master's in public policy?
I do, in fact, yeah.
Excellent. Nice to see you, Emily.
Thank
and
you.
Finally, Clifford Marin, class of 2006, journalism, and is now a full-time practicing attorney. Hi, Clifford.
Hi, nice to see you.
Great, good to see you, Clifford. All right, well, let's start off. This forum really is to give folks a little bit of background about preparing for graduate school, and as such, these questions really do talk about that process of preparing to apply and beginning that process and things that were really important to you. So one of the big questions that I would have, and let's start with Tom, was there any defining moment or an event that led you to pursue graduate school, and what really motivated you to apply and pursue that graduate school path?
Yeah, so the key thing for me was that at the company I was working at, there was a leadership change. And anytime there's change of leadership, you start to think, like, if this goes badly, what am I going to do, right? And I started thinking about where I wanted to go next in my career and started looking at job openings at different companies that I was interested in working at, and saw that an MBA was kind of the common theme across all of these different jobs. So I started exploring MBA programs and looking at that because I felt like I had reached my ceiling in my career trajectory at that point and didn't have the kinds of options that I wanted to have. So just to give myself that flexibility in terms of, if I lost my job right now, where would I go next? I wanted to have the key certification that I would need to move into the jobs that I wanted.
That's a great point, Tom. I think adding that kind of experience and credential makes you more nimble and marketable in a volatile, sometimes, marketplace.
Exactly, yeah.
Excellent. Emily, would you like to give any examples of what motivated you to pursue graduate school?
Sure. So my path to graduate school was maybe a little bit different than some of the other panelists. I went to grad school as soon as I graduated with my undergrad from UMass. And I had started to think about the public policy certificate that the political science department offered. And I then started to learn more about the public policy graduate program and realized that I could go through that program in a year and start in my senior year at UMass do a summer internship and then do 1 full year on campus and then be done with my master's, start my career from there. And it was really appealing to me. And so I decided to apply and get recommendations and then start from there. So
that's great. And it sounds like with the 1 year time frame that it makes it, accelerated but doable.
Yeah, very doable.
That's excellent. Clifford, same question to you. Was there any defining moment that just caused you to pursue graduate school?
Short answer, no. I graduated with a journalism degree, and I really had no idea what it is I wanted to do when I grew up, when I finished college. But I did know that I wanted to get another degree, but I wanted to get another degree that would give me options, that was more, I guess, open-ended. So I took a year off, and I kind of took the summer. I took the few months in the fall to really determine what would be right for me, and just speaking with people, talking with people who had law degrees, business degrees, and other master's degrees. I just kind of made the determination after getting all the information that a law degree might make sense, because since I wasn't 100% sure what I wanted to do, I at least wanted a degree that would translate into a lot of different fields.
That's great, Clifford. And that starts to get at the next question that I hope that you guys could touch on, which is around what considerations you had in mind in that selection process regarding selecting the course of study and the degree that you were pursuing. Clifford, anything you want to add in relation to how you made that selection and kind of the considerations you had in mind?
Sure. And I actually, when I was typing up my notes from the questions that Nicole had sent out, I kind of lumped the first two questions together because of the fact that, again, so, I've now worked, since I graduated law school in 2010. And since then, I've done about 9 different things. I'm now in private practice, and I do love it. And I see myself in this field for the foreseeable future. But I worked in politics for a little while. I did some other kind of offbeat things. A lot of friends of mine that I went to school with aren't practicing law by day and night. People have restaurants, people have started their own businesses. So it really, the degree itself, I wanted something that would give me an entree to many different variations of different fields, because there's so many areas of the law that can be explored, and I really got a taste of that in law school, and now it's really worked out with being in private practice.
That's great. Emily, let's turn to you. It sounds like time frame was one of the considerations that you had in mind for your course of study, but what other factors pushed you towards selecting what you did?
Sure. And one of the biggest factors, I think, was I got a taste for the curriculum while I was in undergrad, because I started with the certificate program. So I knew kind of the core basic elements of the master's program, at least at UMass. And I thought that those were the kinds of classes I wanted to delve more into, and there were some other options for me to take classes that would add things to my toolkit, is even something I like to say, because in public policy you can learn all kinds of different skills to help you create policy in an effective way. So
that's great.
The ultimate reason why I decided to do it. And I grew up wanting to go to law school, but at that point in time, public policy master's was perfect.
That's great. It's a great visual too, that, we all bring our own toolkit, and there's always room for expansion. There's extra rungs on that and shelves in that toolkit. So excellent. Tom, let's ask you the same question. What for you was a major consideration in selecting the program that you did?
Yeah, for me, it was really, validating the return on investment. And of course, that's like the classic business answer. Yeah, it was, I wanted to make sure that the money and time that I was going to put in would result in me getting where I want to be. So to validate that, I think the most effective thing that I did was reach out to alumni from the different programs that I was considering and talk to them and, sort of just learn from their career paths. And that was huge validation in terms of the fact that they got where I want to be. And hearing from them, I was able to pick up on some of those subtleties. I really prioritized programs that had a lot of helpers. So at some programs, you kind of get a sense that things are very competitive, right? And students may undercut one another. And then at other programs, students are more likely to help one another. And that's definitely the kind of culture I was looking for. And at those kinds of places, you get the additional benefit that alumni are also willing to go out of their way to help you, and that's huge. Because in terms of getting, if you're looking at MBA programs in particular, the key in getting post-MBA positions is leveraging that alumni network a lot. Mm-hmm. And so if you go to a school with responsive alumni, that makes a huge difference. And at BYU, where I'm going now, we have a really high response rate from alumni, which is really nice. So probably 8 out of 10 alumni that I send an email to will respond, which is fantastic in a very busy, heavy email world.
That's excellent to know that you've got that support structure in place, and whether through alumni or current students, that there's a community there that's a supportive community.
Yeah, it's huge.
So, Tom, you mentioned return on investment, and that leads to my next question, which is about money, because we promised we'd talk about financing and a little bit around funds for that. So one of my questions is to each of you, starting with you, Tom, what creative or practical advice would you have in thinking about options for financing graduate school?
Well, let's see. I guess speaking from my personal experience, I think it's, first of all, remain open to lots of different possibilities and consider a wide range of programs, and maybe not just the first program that comes to mind. And by doing that, by, taking backing up and looking at all of the different options, I was able to kind of see more factors, and then being open to that meant that I was able to, in the end, get a full tuition scholarship offer. And so, that wouldn't have happened if I had gone in with my initial thought process and just focused on the first schools that came to mind. But I kind of opened up my, range of considerations and ended up getting a really good deal in the end. So yeah, you can't beat not paying for school.
No, congratulations. That's great to get a full scholarship, and good for you for, being open and pursuing different avenues and achieving that. That's great. Clifford, same question to you. Any kind of creative advice or options around financing graduate school?
Well, first of all, Tom, congratulations. That's amazing to have a full scholarship. I went to school when I was looking at law schools. Cost obviously came to mind, and somebody in their mid-20s doesn't necessarily want to live at home. But I decided actually to go to school in New York City, where I was from, and for 2 years of that, I was able to live with my mom and dad in New York, which certainly saved a lot of money. So that was certainly a creative time, but in the long run, it was good, because not only did I save money, but really it created a little bit of more of a support system for me, as well as every once in a while I would, or more than every once in a while, I'd have a home cooked meal waiting for me. So so that was good. But what I would say though is, looking back on everything, because my wife was just lucky enough to get a full scholarship to where she's going to law school here in Connecticut. Looking back on it, I think that what Tom said is true. about keeping your options open, because in my view, in terms of law school specifically, that if you're not going to go, if you don't have the ability to go to a top 5 or a top 10 school in the country, it really doesn't matter where you're going to go, because you're going to get a really good education. So in that sense, keep your options open and go where they give you the most money.
Yeah, shop around a little bit, right? Yep. Great. Emily, same question to you. What kind of creative or practical advice do you have in finance and graduate school?
Sure. I was lucky enough to actually get Nicole's old job. And I became a graduate assistant at UMass. And that, UMass has a wonderful graduate union. So when you become a graduate assistant, you get paid for a certain amount of hours a week, and you get most of your fees and tuition covered. I probably only had to pay about $1,200 out of pocket every semester. So I basically went for free, and I was paid. But that meant I had to work 20 hours a week and go to a pretty intensive graduate program at the same time. And I was lucky because I had built relationships on campus that when Nicole was able to get this wonderful position at the Alumni Association, the Student Activities Office reached out and said, hey, we really need a graduate assistant. Would you like to do it? It's going to be a lot of work. And it wasn't in my field. It was definitely a higher ed position, but I was used to the systems in the office. So I took the position, and I just worked my butt off. But it coming out of graduate school with no loans was a pretty refreshing thing. And it definitely worked out for me. But I know there's a lot of other campuses that have similar graduate, either research positions or, positions in administrative offices where you can get a similar package. And I think making that part of your decision making is also probably helpful.
No, that's great advice. Very good. So moving on to thinking about graduate school and knowing that it's not all, the rosy picture and happy path all the time. Everybody encounters challenges. And starting with you, Emily, what did you see as the largest challenge that you encountered in graduate school, and how did you overcome it?
Sure. When I was reading over the questions, this one was kind of hard. But I think it was the transition from undergraduate work to graduate work, where the quality of what you produce has to meet some certain expectations. And even just the quality of my writing had to change quite a bit. And transitioning pretty quickly, I had to learn pretty quickly. So I really took the edits that my professors made on papers very seriously. I made more drafts of my writing, and my program was more writing intensive. But I think that was probably my biggest challenge going into it. And luckily at the end, I think I did pretty well. So.
Well, that's a good example of transitioning, from undergraduate to graduate to also working and having maybe different levels of expectation of your work when being out in the business working world as well.
Absolutely.
That's great. Clifford, let me ask you the same question. What biggest challenge did you encounter, and how did you overcome that?
I would say the discipline is the biggest thing, especially in law school, where you're just completely inundated with reading your first year, and most courses you take are 100% of your grade is the final exam. So it's really a question of discipline for each semester, to be able to say to yourself, look, my friends are out tonight, but I just can't go out. So it really it's a mental game you have to play with yourself, or saying to yourself, like, look, I have to do this. I'm only going to have to do this once, and it's going to be over soon, and eventually it's going to be summer, it's going to be spring break, or it's going to be winter break. But after the first year, you kind of get the hang of it in terms of what you have to do, when you have to do it, and how much exactly you have to do. but the first year was really a self-discipline process.
Yeah, it's tough to make those choices, but looking back, it's usually worth it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Tom, same question to you. What was your biggest challenge, largest challenge you encountered, and how did you get through that?
Yeah, I think I would kind of second what Clifford said. For me, the biggest challenge was budgeting my time and, being efficient and knowing when to say that something is good enough so that I could move on to the next thing. In business school, they throw a ton of things at you academically, and, they position it in a way that they even admit, like, we give you so much work because we want to give you an amount that you can't possibly do on your own. You have to leverage your classmates to get it all done. That was a huge learning experience for me because my prior education was all in engineering. So I needed to get used to being in a more team-oriented environment where I couldn't possibly get it all done by myself, leverage my teammates. We're assigned a group of 5 students. I think that's similar at most programs where you're assigned a group in your first year, and you really have to leverage that team to get things done. And then also just planning out my entire day and sometimes my entire week before it even starts. I know exactly what I'm going to be working on in every time slot for the week ahead. And if I've assigned myself an hour to get a certain thing done, I have to get it done within that hour. And whatever I come up with is good enough, and I have to submit it and just move on to the next thing.
That's great advice. I would say that my experience was very similar in that my biggest challenge was trying to complete my dissertation, and the kind of scheduling approach that you just talked about was exactly how I got it done. It's so large, and you think of it as, I don't even know where to start. But if you break it down into those pieces and chunk them out and just say, I'm going to spend an hour working on this chapter, and when it's 10 o'clock, I'm done. And you move on. I think that's really helpful advice in a daunting task like finishing a large assignment, finishing a comps, finishing grad, your dissertation, defense, any of that kind of big milestones. Just plan it out and move forward. That's important. Great. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Clifford. I'm going to ask you support systems. Tom touched on that. We've all touched on communities and supportive communities. But what support systems do you see as critical in navigating the graduate school process?
Well, I think it's great to, obviously have a support system of your close friends and your family that you know and you love and, you spend time with and things like that. But during law school, during graduate school, they might be there for good emotional support, but actual real reality support, maybe not so much. And in that sense, it's important to develop relationships with other students because so much of real life work, whether it's in law or I'm sure in business, as Tom just stated, it's collaborative. And, so much of my time in law school was with study groups, was with bouncing off ideas, being able to, tackle an outline together, or being able to discuss something a professor said in class, number one. And then number two, I always made it a point to kind of get friendly with the upperclassmen because they've taken the courses before, they've been through it, and they're still there, so they obviously had some success. And I thought those people were certainly great at getting advice, getting outlines for classes, and just relying on in terms of, having a question in a pinch or something like that, or knowing a certain professor's style, or, what somebody does like or doesn't like. So I think, having your own study group within your class and developing relationships and then being able to rely on people who have done it before.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's always good to have peers who can help you kind of navigate, certain professors' nuances of how best to get in touch with them or get an answer. That's always helpful. Emily, let me ask you the same question. What support systems did you see as critical in navigating graduate school?
Sure. I would definitely share Clifford's thought on your cohorts. being probably the most important support system that you can have. We would spend hours together finishing assignments, bouncing ideas off of each other, trying to figure out some economic equation, and then finishing our homework together. And we really came through the program together. It felt like a group accomplishment when we all graduated because there was a small group of us. And it really, helped us kind of build as a team and rely on each other. I'd also add that the administrative staff of the graduate program or school can also be a great resource to you to make sure that you're taking the right classes when you're supposed to be, or filling out the right paperwork at the right time, and making sure that you're, on the path to graduating when you want to, or, getting your dissertation done and that kind of thing. It can be a really great support system as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's a lot of check marks and, processes that have to be followed, and nobody knows it better than those folks that are taking in that paperwork and checking that everything's right. So good advice. Tom, let me ask you, for you, what support systems were critical?
For me, so I'm married, and so my wife is my biggest support system, and that's been huge. If I have a tough day or I'm pulling an all-nighter, she kind of fills in the gaps at home and makes sure that I have what I need to get back at it the next day, sometimes with only an hour of sleep. And that's been huge. And going into the program, we kind of considered it a joint venture. And we've talked about, our goals together as a team. And that's been a huge help, just knowing that we're on the same page. And if I, am not home 3 nights in a row, that's, it's just a fact of the program, and we'll see each other as much as we can. But having those shared goals has been really helpful.
That's great. That's great. Good. So let me ask you, Tom, to kind of round out the last question. How has completing graduate school enhanced your career and opportunities? What's the big payoff at the end?
So I'm still in it. So I can't fully speak to this. I've been having a lot of success in recruiting, which is good. I have an internship offer from Verizon that I'm really excited about, and continuing to recruit with other companies. I'm flying out to Discover for a second round interview this week, and I'll be visiting a few other companies the week after that. So it's opened up a lot of doors for me, which is really encouraging. And, I'm interviewing with students from all the other schools that I'd considered. So I know that I'm in a good place, and I'm happy to have gotten to this point.
That's great, Tom. Well, congratulations. And it sounds like you've got some great opportunities coming up. So good luck with those.
Thanks.
So Clifford, I'll ask you next. How has completing graduate school enhanced your career and opportunities?
Well, first, I think that, law school in particular has created it's almost, it's a good thing, but sometimes it could be a curse because it really teaches you how to think a certain way. It unleashes kind of this constant analytical mind in everybody who does it. So, it really has created just, an additional intellectual curiosity for me personally. And just on a professional level, it's opened doors. Now, of course, I practice law, so that's my career. But because of my practice of law, I'm able to kind of navigate with things that I wouldn't necessarily have had, an easier time with having a door open to. I serve on multiple boards. I serve on a board for the local Chamber of Commerce. I serve on a charity foundation board for a local bar association. So, creating those contacts in a professional setting has really just been invaluable throughout my career.
That's great. Glad to hear that. Emily, how has completing graduate school for you enhanced your career and opportunities?
Sure. I would definitely also echo what Clifford said about kind of developing my critical thinking and analytic mind when it comes to problems that arise in my job. So for the past year and a half or so, I've been working for, and I think I'm able to come at problems and policy issues a little bit differently than some of my coworkers, or even some of the other folks in the building, with my background and my research background and analytic background. In all reality, I'm going to be really honest, it hasn't helped me financially yet. And I think that is a misconception sometimes, that folks think, oh, I'm going to have this master's degree and it's going to automatically make me more money. It might not, just yet. You know, I think down the line it will for me, but right now it hasn't. And that's, you know, kind of the line of work that I'm in. And that's fine, and I'm happy where I am. But I think that that's something that people really need to understand, is invest in yourself now, but you might not see that financial payback immediately.
Yeah. No, that's great advice. And I mean, it really is an investment in yourself, and you can take that wherever you're going to go. And the payoff may be somewhere else down the road. Or it's your own personal investment that you've gotten more opportunities than you might have otherwise. And I can say too that, you know, my experience in this particular, in terms of my field of study and the career opportunities that opened up for me, is that with certain jobs or contracts, they require the advanced degree, and you can't be bid or involved in a certain position of leadership or running particular aspects of that contract unless you have that credential. And so as far as opening up opportunities for me, that was very important to be able to be considered for those roles, because you do have the credentials to go along with the knowledge base and the experience. That's great. So thank you, everybody. Nicole, I think I'm going to turn it back to you as we've gone through our questions, the prepared part of this. Are there any Q&A that you've received from the participants that we can answer?
Yes, I have some really, really, really good questions. The first question I'm going to ask, and to all of our participants, Heather, who moderated, is also going to participate in the Q&A, given that she has attended graduate school. So the first question, and I would love to get all of your perspectives, given that you all have graduate degrees, when do you suggest taking like the GRE, the GMAT, and the LSAT, and when are applications usually due in your respective fields? So Heather, if you wanted to start us off.
Ooh, I'll start and then I'll kick it over. I know for me, I did take both the GRE and the LSAT, and I took them probably in my next to last or final year of my undergraduate, because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to pursue. And I actually took them both because I just didn't know, do I want to go to law school? Do I want to go to graduate school? So I did it as I was closing towards the end of my undergraduate experience and getting that degree, my bachelor's, only because I just wasn't sure. So I'll kick it over though to maybe Tom, if you want to go next and give your advice on that.
Yeah, sure. So for business school, generally the GMAT is the test you want to take. I took the GRE for my prior master's in bioengineering, but yeah, the GMAT was my more recent focus. And with that, I would say give yourself about 6 months to prepare, and give yourself enough time to take it a second or even third time if you don't get the score that you're looking for. And the cycles for business school depend on the school, but generally round 1 applications are due in September, and then round 2 applications are due in January, and round 3 applications are due in April. And if there's a selective school that you want to go to, you really want to apply in round 1, because at that point the schools have the most slots available. So I'd recommend getting started with the GMAT probably in March-ish if you want to apply in September at the latest. And you know, if you have to wait a year, that is not necessarily the worst thing, because business schools value work experience. The average the average work experience for an MBA is probably about 4 years, and adding a year of work experience generally will help you. It won't. I've never heard of it hurting. So yeah, be patient and give yourself plenty of time would be my advice.
That's great. Clifford, what about you?
Yeah, so I second what Tom says in terms of with the LSAT specifically. So when I was going to law school, schools would average if you took it more than once, but now schools only take your highest score. So you definitely want to leave yourself some time in terms of if you want to take the test again once or even twice, because it is worth it to try to get your score up, because the schools really do look at that in terms of scholarship offerings. I would say give yourself about 3 months to prepare for the test, and then give yourself probably a lot of the schools have rolling admissions. So the earlier somebody applies, the better chance they get to be able to get some of that scholarship money that's available.
Great points. Emily, anything you'd like to add?
I didn't have to take any exams to get into my master's program, so I guess I was lucky. But lately I have been pondering the thought of taking the LSAT, so this is actually helpful for me. So one thing I found out while researching the LSAT exam is, so I'm dyslexic, and I would probably need to file for accommodations for that exam. So that's something that, if I go to do it, I'm going to have to consider that. So I think that probably plays into the timeline. So folks, if you're in the same spot, take that into consideration.
Right. There's timing involved in that application process and verification process.
Yeah.
Great. Nicole, back to you.
So the next question, this is actually specifically for Heather, and I hope that I'm able to connect you and the participant who asked this particular question, because it's regarding a PhD here at UMass, specifically in education. So they wanted to know, what do admissions committees look for when applying to the specific program here in education, and the personal statement, both for funding and for admission?
So I can tell you from my experience, I was admitted to a somewhat small class in the research and evaluation methods program. And I was working full-time at the time, so I was applying as a part-time student. And the thing that mattered most to them was a commitment from me that I was going to finish. So that was, they needed to see a demonstrated commitment to pursuing that field of study, how that field of study, why that interested me, how I was going to apply it in my career. And it directly related to my work. So it was easy for me to make that connection, but it was also good for me to reinforce that I'm a resident here in town. I'm local to the university, not going anywhere, and I want to finish this regardless of the time. So that absolutely helped. Financing, I didn't apply for any scholarships or positions, but I know that a commitment to working, whether in those types of positions that you're able to contribute directly to that particular field of study, or I think, Emily, in your example, being able to work there at the university, that's helpful. For me, I was lucky that my employer actually covered and paid for me to go and earn my doctorate, given that it was a return on investment for them. So in a way, though, if I didn't have that opportunity, I think I would try to make this case for how I would benefit the program and be contributing to active work that they were doing in the field. Because many of these graduate programs do have contracts with different businesses, agencies. They're doing research, they're doing work that is a value add that you can bring, and I think you can see that.
Cool. Thank you, Heather, so much for that. The next question that I have is more of a philosophical question. For all of you, what fields do you all think require a grad degree, And has it become the new bachelor's degree to where everyone is now required to have a master's? So actually,
Interesting.
yeah. So I'm actually interested.
I'll start just because I
Yeah.
touched on this earlier. So I'm in the field of educational measurement, and in our field, whether that's through state contracts for testing, usually educational testing, it might be clinical assessment, it may be, in my case, teacher certification testing, they require certain positions to have the doctorate. And that would be a psychometrician or an educational measurement background. So in that way, it's not like the next bachelor's. It's actually, it allows you to be speaking as an authority on certain matters that are sometimes legal in nature in terms of the state's role in defending their assessments or working with technical advisory committees and being able to speak to the work that you've done. So from my experience, it's not just like a bachelor's. And I think that there's an expectation that comes along with that, that the role that you play is you've got the pedigree and the background and the experience to bring to that role, which is somewhat selective, at least in that field.
Cool. Let's go. Tom, do you have any perspective on that, especially given that you come to the field with 2 masters? Well, you'll have 2 master's degrees in the end.
Yeah, you know, I had similar thoughts, I guess, at least on the level of, where I was at, I wanted to make sure that I would be competitive down the road. So I knew that I might be able to get my next job with the education that I had, but I didn't want to be limited 10 years out because I didn't have a certain degree. So that was kind of part of my strategy in choosing graduate school. And then there's also, the thinking of being strategic with combining your background with your next degree. So for me, I'm combining a master's in business administration with engineering degrees, which companies really value. And so that's kind of a very specific strategic combination that I bring to the table. And I'm sure there are many other similar types of strategic combinations of degrees that could be valuable in different industries. So that's kind of my perspective on it.
Cool, thank you. Then Emily?
Yeah, I've actually pondered this quite a bit, at least in my field and maybe at the career level I'm at right now. A master's degree definitely is not needed, at least to get in the door or to get some level of promotion in the building. But I think down the line, a lot of folks either go the law route and get a law degree, either practice or not practice, or they go down the field of, getting a public policy master's, a master's in economics. And I think that helps get more specialized and make you more marketable. And and just depending on what you want to do, I think it can help you make that decision on what programs you want to do, and even if you want to make a career change. I mean, I've heard a lot of folks, going from one focus to another, and they decided to do that with going back to school. So I think it just all depends.
Cool, thank you. And then Clifford?
Obviously my degree is a professional degree, so I could not be in my field without it. But I think a lot of it comes down to what somebody studies in undergrad. If somebody has a background where it is a field that lucrative positions or actual positions are available, like an engineering degree, like a journalism degree, and things like that, versus more. I don't want to speak badly about any other type of BAs or other degrees that people would get in undergrad, but there are certain areas that maybe wouldn't be, as Emily said, as marketable to come out of undergrad with a degree that's not really job ready. So I think it comes down to, how are you making yourself marketable to the field that you want to work in? Do you want to work in such a specialized field where it's really required that you have an additional educational background? Or, are you going to work in a field where, I have friends that are in the journalism field that, went to undergrad. One of my best friends is a senior producer at a major news network. He graduated undergrad and he's doing great now because he got the tools he needed, and then he got on the job training. So it really comes down to exactly. I think it comes down to how they want to market themselves and what type of field they want to go into.
Cool, thank you. I just got a really, really cool question. It's a two-pronged question from a participant. So they currently work in an industry that they're not sure they want to continue working in for the rest of their career. For all of the panelists and moderator, did your classmates in your respective programs, so for example, like for those who are in law school or a public policy program, who had backgrounds that maybe didn't fit the usual profile of the applicant? And then does working in an industry seemingly irrelevant to the desired grad program you want to apply to, does it hurt your application or funding potential?
Well, I can give one example. So in my MBA program, we have somebody whose prior experience was as a chiropractor, and now he's wanting to go into HR. And, it's hard to, I don't know, like that's a pretty big leap, right? And so it's been cool to see him taking his prior experience and kind of adapting that with an HR focus and a very, different discipline, and kind of tweaking his prior experiences based around the job skills that recruiters are going to look for. It's also cool to see that the degree itself gets him the interview. And then once he's in the interview, he can sell himself, and he's had a lot of recruiting success. So, that's one example, at least, of a pretty significant career switcher through a master's degree.
Cool, thank you. Did anyone else have insight on that question?
I would say, for law school specifically, it literally does not matter what type of background you have. I came into school with a journalism degree. There were people who worked in real estate. There were people who worked in producing commercials. There were people who were coming out of undergrad, because nobody has the skill set of either practicing law when they come to law school, and nobody really knows the nuances of studying law when they come to law school, even if they have a background in working as a paralegal or working as a legal assistant, or having some type of criminal justice degree. You might have a more familiarity, but the minutia that you get into with the law degree program, it makes no difference the type of background that somebody's from. And sometimes, in fact, that a degree program such as a professional degree, like seeing people with prior work experience, maybe in different fields, because they bring that type of intellectual diversity to the school.
I can speak to the educational measurement program that I was in. It was definitely a combination of education and measurement. And so there were some people that were more on the measurement side, that would be like, running data analysis and reviewing and interpreting that data analysis and coding it, and, like hardcore computer, that kind of aspect of the measurement side. Whereas there were others who were former educators, folks who were looking to earn their doctorate to become assessment coordinators at universities, people that were on the education side, but also needing to be able to interpret policy and interpret, requirements and make sense of them in plain language. So I think that those combinations of backgrounds, I saw all of that in our program.
And I also wanted to chime in too, because I, just like the panelists, I went to graduate school as well. I actually have 2 master's degrees, and one of them from UMass. In my first master's program, which was a Master of Fine Arts in Theater Management, we had people in the program from disciplines like history from undergrad, theater, dance, creative writing, English. And I can definitely say from the admissions part, for those types of programs, like if anyone's interested in like arts management, nonprofit management, things like that, one of the big things that they look for is significant work experience between your undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees. Because most of the things that you'll be doing, it's similar to an MBA program. You'll be doing a lot of case study work and a lot of overview work with regards to how to run a successful nonprofit. So like fundraising and strategic planning and board development and things like that. So those are a lot of things that you can't necessarily learn in undergrad. So in that program, we ended up getting a lot of students from various backgrounds, but they did have some sort of work experience, whether if it was an internship for an arts organization or they actually worked a position in the arts prior to applying to the program. With my MA in English, that was very, very different because the program I was in, they were training scholars to go on to do tenure track programs. So a lot of the times they were looking for students who had either a degree in English or particular coursework that was related to English. And for me, given that my undergraduate degree was in theater and drama and reading literature based in like dramatic literature, that actually made me a really strong candidate for that particular program. So I feel like to best answer that question from my perspective, it really depends on the graduate program that you're pursuing. And
I'll finish that off. So my graduate program, the Master's in Public Policy was partnered with the Master's in Public Policy and Administration program, and that was 2 years. And that program had a huge array of folks from all different kinds of backgrounds, different timelines in their career, people that were making huge career changes. And I think what made our program so good is because we had so many folks from different fields of study combining to look at policy and come up with really good solutions. And especially in the government world, that's seen as an asset. So I think a lot of folks tend to look at, I think, Masters in Public Policy or Masters in Public Policy and Administration programs as a way to take their experience either in work or their other fields of study and then apply it to policy change either in the government level or nonprofit level. So all different backgrounds are welcome.
Cool. So that was actually our last question for the evening. So we're actually really good at wrapping up right now. So I want to thank you all for participating in today's Young Alumni virtual chat, preparing for graduate school. In addition to virtual chats such as this one, the Alumni Association has a variety of resources to support you as you begin to navigate your career and time beyond campus, including networking events. We actually have one coming up on November 8th here on campus. Career development opportunities and Alumni Advisors, which is an online networking and mentoring platform connecting you with alumni in your field for career advice, informational interviews, resume feedback, and mock interviews. To learn more about these resources, please visit our website at umassalumni.com. So on behalf of the UMass Amherst Alumni Association, we would like to thank Heather, Tom, Emily, and Clifford for making the time to share their experiences and insight with us. So thank you again for joining us this evening, and we hope to see you at other Alumni Association events in the future. Have a great evening and go UMass.
Thank you.
Thank
you.